If Not for God with Mike Zwick today show. Mike, you have a treat from Corinthians for us.
Yeah, we were just there, and I got to pull it up. So give me a sec. It is 1 Corinthians chapter 9, and we are starting in verse 19. It says, "Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews I became a Jew, to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings." And Robby, one of the things that you were talking about was you said something about being a salesman.
Yeah, I think most of us who ever, train salespeople for a living, which certainly I did that as a car dealer, recognize this passage as what we call common ground. So, most sales trainers are going to do something called the road to the sale, and the first step on anybody's road to the sale is establish common ground, which is a beautiful thing when you think about Jesus used common ground to establish common ground. In other words, to fishermen he talked about fish, to farmers he talked about farming and soil, and to women about their dowry, or you could hear always in his parables that he was speaking to people in their culture and things that they thought about. And so, one of my favorite stories of common ground people is, I had this old used car salesman. He was the best I ever saw. He just was. And he could establish common ground with anybody almost immediately with two simple questions. And I loved the way he did it. His name was Phil Marlin, and he would look at the person, and he just was a warm country guy from Tennessee, and he would say, "Where are you from?"
Yeah.
And the people would say, "I'm from Ebony, or I'm from Winston-Salem," or whatever. And then he would get him with his second question, which he'd look him dead in the eye and go, "Originally?" And then all of a sudden, "Oh, well, actually, I was raised in Colorado, and I grew up in Longmont, and are you right there on the face of the mountains?" And off he went into this person's childhood, and within a matter of moments, he had them back there at a place that was delightful to them, and talking about things that they loved about their hometown, whatever that may be, and whatever home was. And he would be coming, to the person that was from Denver, he would become somebody from Denver. From a person from Chicago, he would become somebody from Chicago. In other words, he would try to establish a common ground in a relationship with people with things that they want to talk about and things that they understand in their culture, which is different,
Yeah, I one of the things that I think about is, as I remember, I was in my early 20s and I needed an attorney to help me get out of a speeding ticket. And I just remember being really closed off, Robby, when I went and spoke to the attorney. And I remember all of a sudden the attorney asked me a few questions. And before I realized it, I was talking for like 25 minutes. And all of a sudden, this guy was my best friend. He didn't say two words during that, other than asking me questions and pushing me and stuff like that. The book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, he says how to become a good conversationalist. And he says to talk to people about things that they're interested in. And I've heard stories of missionaries who go into another country, and the first thing that they do is they learn the language of the people in the other country. Because how are you going to win people to Christ if you can't communicate with them? The next thing that they learn is they learn their culture, and they learn how they do things in a certain way. A lady named Jungle Jen comes to mind. We had her on the show, and she's been down to the Amazon, and she shows pictures of where she's dressed up like the people down there. Well, she didn't do that just because she felt like doing that at first, although now I think she probably enjoys it. But she did that as a way, and she said the people would come up to her and they'd say, "Hey, it's really cool that you're dressing up like us." And people, as you've probably heard, that like attracts like. So people are interested in talking to people who at least have something in common with them. And I feel like at the end of the day, and that's what I get from 1 Corinthians chapter 9, I do this all for the sake of the gospel. It's so that people will be able to say yes to Jesus, because, if they're going to say no to Jesus, I want it to be because they don't like the gospel, or they're willing, or they don't want anything to do with Jesus. But I don't want it to be because they don't like me, or they don't, they felt like I was rude or something like that. And I think that's one of the things that he was saying. As a matter of fact, I've got a quote from Charles Spurgeon, and it says that preaching is the most idle of occupations. If the word of my hearers, if you are not converted, I waste my time and energy in standing here. People might well think it madness that one whole day in the week should be given up to hear speeches. Madness indeed, it would be for nothing. Nothing would come out of it at all, conscience and heart, if you do not bring forth fruit to holiness, and the end is not everlasting life, that I would be better employed in breaking stones on the side of the road than preaching to you. And one of the things that I was thinking about was that in order to get to the point, Robby, and that was that salesman you were talking about, in order to get to the point where he was talking about his product, first he had to make the person feel comfortable with him. And if he wasn't able to make a connection with them, he never would have gotten to that point. Can you think of maybe an example in your life where you were trying to tell somebody about Jesus or trying to share the gospel, and where you first kind of had to overcome that hurdle?
Oh, it's common, that, and I love what Paul says there are things that you wouldn't necessarily think about in the sales training situation.
Yeah.
But he says to those that are under the law, I became as one under the law. And so what he's saying is, I'm talking to legalists,
yeah.
right? I'm talking to the Pharisees
right.
as a Pharisee.
Right.
Even though that isn't my underlying real conviction, he's not a legalist, but he realizes that in order to, have a conversation with these people, he's going to get there. The other thing that he says, to the weak, I became weak.
Mm.
Now, what does that look like? Well, I don't know how many conversations you've had with special needs people, but because I've been, doing that at church for years, in order to have a conversation with them, I don't know that what you would call that. It's just different, and it's a completely different place that you better go if you're going to have a conversation for them. Mm. So I tell this story, it's a heartbreaker, but it's still a great story about how arrogant I am. We had a young man that came in, his name was Joshua. And Joshua was one of these special needs people that was in a wheelchair. His arms were the size of a small stick, and he couldn't hold up his own head, so he had the support. You're picturing this person, you've probably seen somebody like this in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. They're just skinny. They can't hold up their own head, so they got support in this wheelchair in order to hold up his head. And every time I would begin to teach, especially when I got to the parts I thought were important, yeah, Joshua would begin this moaning. He would go, and it was actually pretty disturbing. Mm. And it would never cease that, right when I thought I was supposed to, everybody gets distracted to begin with, because a lot of them are autistic and it takes nothing to distract them. Mm. And so here you are, and then here comes Joshua going, and so I was actually quite frustrated. And every time his mom would come in, because I thought that Joshua wasn't getting anything, I assumed that Joshua was just miserable, and he was screaming that way and moaning because he was miserable. It sure sounded like he was. Mm. And his mother would say, Joshua just loves this class. He can hardly wait. I'm thinking, what? He can hardly wait till he comes to this class. And I'm like, no. You're reading something into this that just isn't there, because this does not look like pleasure to me in any way, shape, or form. I'm not seeing that. Mm. So every Christmas we would have a Christmas party, and we would kind of get the parents there and show them what we were learning. We were doing these hand signs of walk through the Bible, and even those who are not verbal in autism or Down syndrome or whatever can still do the hand signs, and it's really a wonderful thing to see. And you can see these people, my friends, worship God in a way that only they can worship God. And I don't know if I'm saying it's just being there with them in their culture so that you can reach them for Christ. It's a perfect example of it. Yeah. So we're going to do our big thing. And as usual, right at my big moment, and I start to say, okay, guys, here we go. And I start doing the hand signs. And of course, Joshua, and I'm like, oh, not now, not here.
Right.
This is horrible. And Joshua's mom says, Joshua, it's not your turn. And if there was ever a moment in my life where I wanted to crawl under the chair and go, oh God, I am so arrogant.
Yeah.
I just cannot believe what you've done here. You're showing me that Joshua just was wanting to participate with what he could participate with.
Right.
He knew he could make noises.
Right.
And I'm like, I can't believe I've done this. I just felt low. And Joshua immediately hushed as soon as his mom said that, and we went through and did it. Well, that was on a Saturday night, that Christmas party. Sunday morning, class meets again. And if we begin the class, I said, okay, I have been just totally arrogant and just no clue what's going on in life.
Yeah.
And so, Joshua, it is your turn, buddy. You tell us what you want to share with us. And he threw it off. Off he went.
Yeah.
And for quite some time, I didn't interrupt him. I'm like, Joshua, you keep going. You tell us whatever it is that you have to tell us.
Yeah.
Because clearly we have not let you talk.
Right.
And you wanted to. From that class forward, Joshua never did that again as an interrupt. He did it when we would say, okay, Joshua, it's your turn, and off he goes.
Wow.
He was completely there and completely aware of what was going on, and he was an amazing young man.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, God knows. About a year later, Joshua went to be with the Lord. And I cannot tell you what God did for my heart in seeing how little I really understand what's really going on.
Yeah.
In any given situation. So when I see that he would become weak to those who are weak, well, I don't know what that is as far as strong or weak or whatever, but I get the sense that you just got people that are a lot different than you, and to make any assumption that what's really going on you have some understanding of is just way off the mark.
Yeah, that's a great story. And one of the things when you're talking about this and when I'm thinking about it is that everybody wants to be important, and Joshua, he couldn't have a conversation, couldn't say anything, but that was his way of getting involved. And the it's interesting. We always talk about and God is the only one who can save people. We were talking about that earlier today. But I do believe that God partners with people and he works with us. He wants us to be a part of it. And when you're saying when that guy was connecting with people, when he was asking them, where are you from originally, it was a conversation. It wasn't just him bang, bang, bang trying to sell something. And one of the things that I think of sometimes is that evangelism in whatever shape you're looking at, there is some effort. There is some preparation. There is some planning. There is some stuff that we have our part. And I think one of the cool things is that we can learn to enjoy that. I mean, I'll come and we'll talk about our show beforehand and stuff like that, and I enjoy that sometimes just as much as the show, But it was there was a story I was thinking about this years ago. I was selling insurance, and in this particular time, I was sort of in a slump, Robbie. I wasn't selling as much as I had usually sold, and I was sitting in the car and I was trying to figure out what was going on, and I said something that came to me, and it said that people don't just casually buy life insurance. Not walking down the road or knocking on the door. Oh gosh, I'm glad you came. Where is my checkbook? What? An insurance salesman. He's here.
I've been waiting for this.
Yeah, I've been. So, but it does. I mean, it takes planning. It takes work. It takes effort. And there is our part that we definitely have to do. And so one of the things that I was thinking about was that when we're going out sharing the gospel, when we're talking to people about Jesus, what I see him saying in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, I became like a slave, I became like a Jew, is that it took some thinking. I mean, I know we were talking about before, I think Timothy was actually circumcised as an adult. And so I guess you could say he had some skin in the game. Is that right, Robby?
Yeah, the first cut is the deepest. But you really think about that from my perspective. The difference between making a sale and manipulation is love. Mm-hmm. It just is. In other words, you can take all these skills that we're talking about, and I can train somebody how to do that, make the effort, and accomplish whatever goal as far as salesmanship. But if actually the transaction doesn't come out of a point of I really do want to help this person sitting in front of me, and I don't still want to sell them a life insurance policy, I want to protect their family. Right. I don't want to just sell them a life insurance policy. I want them to have some sense of what they're planning for the future and all that. And I don't want to sell them something that's going to hurt them, that they can't afford, or is going to hurt their budget and whatever. And so if I'm coming into this transaction, and certainly I sold 1 million cars like that, and sometimes told people, I don't think you ought to buy this car, and sometimes I got in a lot of trouble for it. But it was from a point of, I want to help you, I really want to do based on what my understanding is. The challenge there is, don't think you understand more than you understand, because you can see, like most salesmen, I have a tendency towards arrogance. Like, I know what's best for you.
Right.
Well, I don't. Right? And so the conversation that needs to take place, it really is in me understanding completely where you're coming from and what's going on in your life to determine whether or not this is something that we can decide on together is a good decision. And in Christ, even more so, right? You've heard me tell the story of when Johnny Hendrick came to Christ, who was a car salesman. And I asked God, what do I say to him? What's the magic? Because I can't get deeper than skin with this guy. I mean, he won't go deeper than anything.
Right.
And he said, Robby, he's a car salesman. And as soon as he said that to me, that was the common ground. You see, that was this passage. To a car salesman, I became a car salesman.
Yeah.
And I said, Johnny, I made a deal with God. Well, to a car salesman, a deal is a deal. And that meant everything to him. And so to a car salesman, I became a car salesman, and not because I went, 1 Corinthians chapter 9. No. It wasn't like that. No, it was like, I'm praying and God's saying, dummy.
Yeah.
He's a car salesman. Talk to him from that perspective. To a farmer, you talk about farming. Yeah. To a fisherman, you talk about fishing. To a Duke fan, you don't talk about Carolina.
How about those Tar Heels, right?
That was salesmanship 101, right? You were supposed to actually go look at their trade-in, see if there's any bumper stickers. I'd rather be fishing, I'd rather be flying, Duke, whatever you saw, right? And even I would teach people, talk about the car they drove up in. What'd you like about that car? What didn't you like about that car? It's a point of common ground. And you can begin to understand what they like in a car, what they don't like in a car. Just keep going, what was your favorite thing about that car? Do you have a good memory about taking that car on vacation? Or, and people will, because to a salesman, quite honestly, your questions are your toolbox. To a mechanic, he needs 7/8, and he needs this, and this. Well, to a salesman, you need some Socratic method, and and you need open-ended questions, and you need, questions that have multiple choice, like, is 10 o'clock better or 3 o'clock this afternoon? We've all been down that. There's a toolbox of questions that salesmen are taught.
Right.
If used without love, it's manipulation. But it's if used in order to gain trust and understanding and help really know what's going on in order to guide the people what you know about that product. Because think about, stuff about life insurance that your average customer has no clue, and it's really a dangerous place. But people take advantage of them all the time, right?
They do. And when you were saying that, Robby, one of the things that came to my mind was this: is we will prepare, we will plan, we will take all these measures so that when we're selling life insurance or when we're selling cars, that we can sell the car or we can sell the life insurance policy. But you know what? If we don't sell that car, if we don't sell that life insurance policy, I mean, oh well, we can always live to fight another day. Maybe somebody else will buy, no big deal. I think what I'm getting from this in 1 Corinthians 9 is that you're talking about where somebody's going to spend their eternal destiny.
Yeah, this is a little more. This is real life insurance here.
Yeah, this is
fire insurance.
It's so much more. It's so much more important than just a sale. And so one of the things that I'm thinking of is that it's important that we prepare and that we know our stuff. It's one of the verses that came to my mind was Psalms 119. Psalms 119, and I believe it was. I thought it was verse 5, but it may not be. But it's that your word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And so that if we're going to explain the gospel to people, I've talked to so many different Christians who said, well, I want to talk to people about Jesus, but I don't know what to tell them. I don't know how to answer this or that or the other. And so take some time and study the Word of God. Take some time and study, the apologetics.
Take some time and pray.
And all of the above, yeah.
I was going to Jamaica last summer, or summer before last, actually, with Teen Challenge to speak to a bunch of Jamaicans that were, up there in the mountains. And we have a, curriculum that we use at boot camps. You've been in one. Mm-hmm. And if you were to look at it, a lot of them have American military fighting, battles or whatever. But now I'm going to Jamaica. And so I'm praying, and God says, why not use their William Wallace? In we have film clips that we use at Braveheart as William Wallace and a picture of Jesus. Well, what does that look like to the Jamaican history? Find their heroes, find their George Washington, their Abraham Lincoln, whatever. And so there was a guy, man. He was like, he literally died. He was the guy that died for his country. That happened to be a pastor at the time that he lost his life, right? And so I made all these different slides with use of this, both the Jamaican color, their flag, but this guy's picture. And what it was completely, how are they going to relate to a guy in an American military uniform? Yeah. But believe me, they could definitely relate. I wish I could remember the guy's name, but man, it's when I came out the first break, they're like, they could sense that this was for them. It was custom made.
And whether it was you or whether it was Jungle Jen or whether it was a missionary who's willing to learn the language or a missionary who's willing to learn the cultures and whatever it is, people see that you took effort to do this. And if they see that you're taking effort to do this, and they know, when you're telling people about Jesus, there's no financial gain there. You're not, it's nothing like that. But when they see that you're doing this, I think they can see that you really feel that this is important. This is important. Like you were talking about, where are you going to spend eternity? And so one of the things that we could do, pray. Read the Bible, prepare, plan, think about, hey, what are some different ways that I can maybe kind of connect with this person or get their attention, because this is so important. So
and God has been training you.
Yeah.
From the day you were born, He's been training you. You have unique skills. Yeah, He trained me on how to sell cars.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was not training me how to sell cars for no good reason. He was training me how to do that because He knew that He was actually training the Christian car guy.
Yeah.
He trained me in certain business aspects. He trained me in all these different things that I found later in life were very specifically I was trained for on social networking. For what? Yeah. Because it's to use to leverage the kingdom. And so don't fall away from your own story. Like, it is a huge map to where God is taking you, because you are uniquely qualified to do things that only you know, because You're the guy that's worked in computer programming since you were 10. You're the guy that worked in, fast food restaurants, and you can speak to somebody in a fast food restaurant or somebody with that background way better than I can.
That's right.
Or you're the guy that's worked with special needs people.
That's right.
Whatever that is, it was no accident.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, Robby, some people say, well, Robby, you're the Christian car guy. You've got your own radio station, so you're preaching and stuff like that. Well, actually, it says in Scripture, not everybody is an apostle. Not everybody is a preacher. He gives different people different gifts. Some healing, some are apostles, some giving. Some people give. It takes people giving money to the church, giving money to the. I mean, they're, and I think sometimes, Robby, and you've probably seen this. It's the person up front, at the front of the church who's talking. They tend to get the most attention. And it's the guy who's behind the scenes, maybe the custodian in the church, who's cleaning up the church, or somebody who has people over to their house and feed them. They're not getting the adulation. They're not getting the credit. But according to Scripture, they're important too. So maybe somebody who's listening, hey, maybe you're saying, hey, I'm not out there preaching, or I'm not even out there, even going up and evangelizing, but there is something that they can do, right? I mean, there's something, and that there's something that they're probably already doing.
Yeah, and the body of Christ, it says you got noble members and ignoble, which means some people clean toilets for Christ.
Yeah.
And there's ways to do that that become so attractive that like, yeah, I want that.
Yeah.
I want that. And where did that come from? Where did that come and come? It came from wanting to know that person. Where did they get that love?
Yeah.
They got it from Jesus. And so if you're listening right now, right, Mike?
Yeah.
It's if not for God time.
It's if not for God. I mean, and we're talking about connecting with people and how to win people for Jesus. And there's one thing that we can connect with you on right now if you're listening, and that's the fact that we're all going to die. It is given to man once to die and then the judgment. But we want you to spend eternity in heaven with us. Is that right, Robby?
Exactly, and it's pretty easy to do that. In fact, it's unbelievably easy to just say, Jesus, I want you to come in my heart. I want you to save me. I know that you died for my sake. I know that you paid the cost for my sins, so that I can walk with you in complete innocence and that freedom. And I want to turn my life over to you, to live my life for you. And please, God, save me, put people in my path and in my direction to disciple me and show me more about your word, about the Bible, that I can serve you and walk with you and spend eternity together with you.
If not for God.
If not for God. Yeah.